It's been a while since the UFC have been in Brazil. And in that time, the world has gone through an entire global health pandemic, effects of climate change with bushfires. The US faced a storming of the Capitol. The rich got eaten. We entered into the metaverse. The arguable GOAT won it all. And something about monoliths. And a whole host of other things. But what was the context of the UFC back then and some of the fighters on the card? Enter the bull ring. The last UFC card in Brazil was a fight night card featuring Oliveira and Lee. This was the first fight behind closed doors due to the pandemic. The last pay-per-view in Brazil was Rose vs Andrade in May 2019. At the time of Lee vs Du Bronx, UFC were on numbered event UFC 248, that awful Stylebender and Romero card, which happened a week prior. UFC cancelled the upcoming card. Woodley was scheduled to meet his maker, Leon Edwards, but that side plot ended up being the start of one of the most iconic MMA stories of all time. Today's card, Glover vs Hill, is UFC 283. On the date of Lee vs Oliveira on March 14th, 2020, these were the weight class champions. 60% of current title holders are new champions. 80% of the titles changed hands at least once. Volk and Valentina the only two holdouts, the last of the Mohicans. The interesting stories here are that John Jones was actually actively fighting. He was the champion. He had just fought Dominic Reyes. He has since not fought, which indicates how potentially the game might have passed him, but is scheduled to fight in a couple of months. Volkanovski has been the most consistent, and he'll be shooting for another belt soon. All female champions are the same as before, with Valentina being the longest reigning amongst them. Amanda Nunes and Zhang Weili both reclaimed their titles whilst losing it during this period. Nunes was the only Brazilian champion at the time. Now two others have joined her, Alex Pereira at middleweight and Davison Figueiredo, who fights today. Glover can reclaim the championship he lost, and that could lead to 4 Brazilian champions in 2023. The most interesting case is Brandon Moreno, who was on the Lee vs Oliveira card. Since then, he's won the championship and lost it. He's become interim champ, and now he's going to fight for the 4th time to become undisputed today against the same guy that he's been fighting for the past few years. In the wider MMA and sport context, Bellator had cancelled their Pitbull vs Carvalho card scheduled for March 13th, a day before Lee vs Oliveira. And then they went on a 5-month hiatus, returning in July. One championship had a similar fate in their 10th year, as they cancelled events and returned in July also. One of those postponed events was Mighty Mouse vs Moraes for the rematch. The PFL had to completely cancel their 2020 season. Influencer boxing was pretty much still in its infancy, with only a handful of YouTube guys fighting each other in semi-pro bouts. 2020 was a clear demarcation for the bubble's leading star, Jake Paul, who went from stopping a fellow YouTuber in Anison Gibb in January 2020 to knocking out former NBA player Nate Robinson later that year. That was on the undercard of Tyson vs Roy Jones Jr. Speaking of boxing, it was around this time when Tyson Fury put on a clinic on Wilder in their second fight. In the next episode, we'll delve into the Lee vs Oliveira card itself and explore the key combatants and actors and where they are now. We'll talk Burns and Paige Van Zandt, and of course, Oliveira's all-time streak and title run, and we'll finally get to see where Kevin Lee fits into all of this.